Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to get started. I forgot to preface this yesterday, but I apologize in advance for any coughing that you hear coming from me. If you haven't figured it out yet, or if you haven't been told yet, I do currently have COVID. Um, so if there's coughing during this video, and there will be some coughing, I apologize in advance. So yesterday, you guys were looking at this lesson right here, symptoms, screenings, and exams. Specifically, we're going to go through these ones, the call the doctor or waited out symptoms. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to go through the ones that you should wait out because you can read those yourself. I am going to go through the ones that you should call the doctor for. So the first one on the ones that you should call the doctor for, coughing, coughing that lasts more than 2 or 3 weeks. Kind of ironic, that's the first one. But yeah, coughing is relatively normal, but if it persists for 2-3 weeks or more, that is definitely something you'd want to call the doctor for, as it could be the sign of something more serious. In general, anytime you have a symptom that lasts for more than 7 days, you should call. So all of these ones on here that says you should wait for, like these ones, for example, if those symptoms, like if you're vomiting for 7 days, you should definitely call the doctor. If you experience painful swallowing for more than 7 days, you should definitely call the doctor. But if it's only just, if you're vomiting a couple days, that's something you can just wait out. But anything that lasts longer than 7 days, you should definitely be calling the doctor for. Black or bloody stools. Yeah, anytime your stool is black or bloody, as well as vomit. If your vomit is ever black or bloody, that is not normal. You should definitely call the doctor for that. Symptoms of dehydration, such as very dry mouth and armpits, confusion, decreased urination, particularly in children and older people. So the reason why, particularly in children and older people, is because dehydration can hit a little bit harder in children and in older people, can be a little bit more severe. That's why it specifies. The next one right here, frequent heartburn, belching, or regurgitation. So anytime you experience anything that is frequent, so looking specifically at the frequent heartburn, that is definitely something that you would want to have examined by a medical professional. Persistent or severe abdominal pain. Again, anytime you have something that is frequent or persistent or severe, regardless what it is, that's definitely something you should be calling the doctor for. Persistent nausea, same thing. Anytime you have something that is persistent, you should be calling the doctor for. Moderate or severe abdominal pain. This one, if it was severe, you definitely want to call. If it was moderate, depending on what your pain tolerance is, this one you could maybe argue either way. If we look at the, so it was vomiting. So this one you could argue either way. I put it as call, just simply because it said severe. Symptoms of dehydration, again, we just talked about this one up here. Green, black, or bloody vomit. Again, anytime that your vomit is discolored, that's a reason to be concerned. So this one's an interesting one. Severe headaches that peak in intensity within seconds. These are called thunderclap headaches. These are pretty uncommon. Not a whole lot of people experience this, but this is cause for concern, as it could be a telltale sign of something more serious. So if you're having severe headaches that peak in intensity within seconds, those are called thunderclap headaches, something that you're going to want to get checked out. Anytime you're experiencing memory loss or confusion, that is something you are going to want to call. Blurred or double vision. This one, you could argue this either way. If it's something like you have blurred vision because your eyes are really dry, then once you kind of that dryness goes away, your vision should come back to normal. But if this is something that you frequently experience or it is persistent, it lasts for a little while, that's something you're going to want to call for. So with this one, it depends on exactly the scenario. You would have to be the judge of that one. Loss of balance or dizziness. Generally, this is something that you're going to want to call for. Seizures, that one should be pretty self-explanatory. If you're having a seizure, you're definitely going to want to call the doctor. Numbness, numbness or weakness in the arms, legs, or face. This can be a telltale sign of something more serious. So just to be on the safe side, that's probably something you're going to want to call the doctor for. Rapid or galloping heartbeats, or also known as palpitations, definitely 100% something you're going to want to call for. If you're experiencing chest pain, I believe this one was pertaining to heart problems. So if you if you have heart problems, like a history of heart problems, you're experiencing chest pain, that is definitely something you are going to want to call the doctor for. Swelling or redness in or around the eye. This one kind of depends. If the redness or swelling is something that goes away within a relatively short period of time, that's something you could wait out. But if it's something that is persistent, that is something that you are probably going to want to call a doctor for. Problems with vision. If you're having problems with your vision, you're definitely going to want to call. Specifically, you're going to want to go to an eye doctor. He or she might recommend you have glasses or start wearing contacts or something along those lines. Fever of over 100.4. That's something you're going to want to call a doctor for. In this day and age, it could be a sign of COVID, could be a symptom of COVID. So something you're going to want to call a doctor for. A rash that is painful, involves swelling or oozes, that is abnormal. So you will want to call the doctor for that one. Symptoms that prevent participation in usual activities, particularly new or worsened shortness of breath with exertion. That could be the sign of something more serious. So you're going to want to call. I believe all these ones in red are just general problems, I believe. Yeah, these are all just general problems. Unexplained weight loss, generally that's something you're going to want to call the doctor for as well. Dizziness or an about to faint feeling. So that is, again, something that you are probably going to want to call the doctor for. Persistent fatigue. Now, the reason why this would be call is because it's persistent. Anytime something is persistent, that is something you are going to want to call the doctor for. And then the very last one that I wanted to highlight was sweating, especially heavy or cold sweats. So this one, it would be depends. You could put this in the call column, or you could put this in the waited out column. Reason being is cold sweats can potentially be an early sign of a heart attack. Not always. If you have COVID, like I do right now, I'm actually experiencing this. But cold sweats could also be the sign, one of the first signs of a heart attack. So that one would be depends. You'd have to use your own judgment for that one. Okay, so tomorrow morning, actually, you'll be viewing this tomorrow. So today, this lesson will be uploaded. It's titled Asking Questions to Share Responsibly. So before I dive into this one, if you have not finished the symptoms, screenings, and exams from yesterday, do that first before you start looking at this one. So I'm just going to go over these real quick. Interpersonal communication skills. So these are skills that help facilitate communication, such as effective listening, responding to the emotions of others. This is also referred to as empathy, because if you can't put yourself in somebody else's shoes, There can be a communication breakdown. Assertive communication, you don't want somebody to just push you over. If you have any questions, thoughts, or concerns, you're going to want to make sure those are addressed. Questioning. So this I'm actually going to talk about a little bit more in depth in just a second. But with questioning, you're going to, actually, I'll just hold on to that one. So refusal, if someone is trying to pressure you into something that you don't want to do, it is okay to refuse. Collaboration, oftentimes things are too big for just one person to handle, or it might cut down the workload a ton if you collaborate with somebody else. Very lastly, negotiation. So sometimes you might want one thing and your friend or a family member or potentially a future coworker might want another. Oftentimes what you'll have to do if that arises is you'll have to negotiate so you can both get what you want. You might not get all of what you want, but getting some of what you want is ultimately better than nothing. And ultimately it will lead to better communication moving forth. So looking at questioning specifically. So when it comes to asking effective questions, there's some nonverbal behaviors such as looking at the person in a relaxed way. However, there's also multiple verbal behaviors, which we are going to practice this in just a second. So some verbal behaviors when it comes to asking effective questions. Ideally, you'd want to ask open-ended questions. If you're asking them simply yes or no questions, that kind of shuts down the topic pretty quickly. You don't get all of your questions truly answered. So leave your questions open-ended. Specifically, when I'm talking about these, I'm talking about if you are at the doctor, maybe getting your vision checked or something along those lines. Asking close-ended questions to get simple information. Now this could be yes or no questions as well. In some cases, it might be best to ask yes or no questions. Ultimately, you will have to be the judge of that. When you're asking somebody questions, such as a doctor, you're going to want to make sure that your questions are clear and concise. If your questions are not clear and concise, there can be a lot of confusion, some miscommunication, to the point where you thought that maybe you did have a question answered, but then you find out that your question really wasn't answered because there was that communication breakdown. Lastly, you want to avoid asking why questions. This is just sorry. So avoid asking avoid asking why questions. Sorry. So we're going to practice this. So keeping these things in mind, I want you to look at these 4 scenarios. So the first one is your healthcare provider suggests that you have some medical tests. Second one is your healthcare provider gives you a diagnosis. Third one, your healthcare provider prescribes a new medicine. And lastly, your healthcare provider recommends surgery. So what I want you guys to do is I want you to think to yourself, what questions should you ask if these 4 situations occur? Now, these are just general questions that would apply to anybody in all 4 of these scenarios. So go ahead and pause the video now. Think of some questions that you can ask in these 4 hypothetical situations. So go ahead and pause the video. Okay, so if we look at the first one, hopefully you had a chance to think of a few. Maybe you collaborated with somebody else, which would be great. So the first one, your healthcare provider suggests you have some medical tests. So some potential questions that you could ask in this scenario, you could maybe ask like, what is the test for? Why is this test needed? What will the results tell me? How is the test done? You might ask, what'll happen if I don't get this test? That would be something that would be very important to know. You might ask, is there any side effects? What side effects should I report to you if I do start experiencing these? Questions along those lines. That is not an extensive list. That's just a few examples. Okay, if we look at the second one, your healthcare provider gives you a diagnosis. So some potential questions that you can ask for this one. You might ask them, could you draw me a picture or show me what's wrong? Oftentimes, if you ask, I can just about guarantee you your doctor or healthcare provider will go into depth to explain exactly what the issue is. You might explain, or excuse me, you might ask what causes this type of problem. You might ask something like, is this serious, or how serious is this? You might ask, will there be any long-term effects of this problem? You could maybe ask something like, when can I return to school or work? You could maybe ask something like, how can I prevent this from happening again? Questions along those lines. Now, again, that is not an extensive list. That's just a few examples. Okay, if we look at the third one, your healthcare provider prescribes a new medicine. So some potential questions you could ask in this scenario. You might ask, what will the medicine that you are prescribing do? You might ask, how do I take it? Are there any side effects? You might ask, what'll happen if I don't take it? You might ask, should I stop the medicine if I feel back to normal? You might ask, how long should I take it? You might ask, what if I accidentally miss a dose? Things along those lines. That's not an extensive list. Those are just some examples. And lastly, your healthcare provider recommends surgery. So some potential questions you could ask for this one might be something like, why do I need this surgery? You might ask, are there other ways to treat my condition first before surgery? You might ask, how often do you perform this surgery? You might ask something like, do I need to change my daily routine? You might ask something like, which hospital is best for my needs? You might ask something like, what are the potential side effects or consequences of having this surgery? You might ask some questions along those lines. So keeping that in mind, what I want you guys to do now is look at this PDF right here. It's titled, what do I ask? What do I say? Now, do this in Cami, okay? Don't do this in a Google Doc. Do this in Cami. Reason being is if you try to do this in Google Doc, it's not going to look right. It's not going to come out right, which ultimately means that you're probably not going to get the grade that you should. So do this in Cami. So what you're going to do is you're going to look at these 4 different case studies. Yes, I want you to do all 4 of these. You can work with a group if you want to. If you're working with a group, you only need to submit 1 copy of this. However, make sure that all of your group members' names are on it. So when you're annotating with Cami, make sure you include all of your group members' names at the top. Because if you do this in a group and one of you submit it, but the person who submits it doesn't put everybody's name on it, everyone else is going to get a 0 because I don't know who worked with this person on it. So make sure that you put all of your names right here where it says name at the top right corner. So we'll kind of walk through the first case study together before I turn you guys loose. So case study number 1, I believe that's pronounced Ryan. Ryan moved to a new city. She didn't want to move, but her family was transferred. She was really happy at her old school and had a close group of friends. She's just getting acquainted with her new school and making new friends. She has joined a sports team and is enjoying the practices. Her grades are okay, at least as good as they were in her last school. Lately, she has been really tired. She she wonders if she's doing too much, but she thinks she was this active at her last school, so that doesn't make sense. She keeps thinking that she will feel better soon, but it doesn't happen. It's been 3 weeks and she can hardly get out of bed in the morning. Her friends have even commented that she seems down. She didn't want to talk to her parents about it. They have enough to do with the move and settling the old house. She decides to go to the school clinic. So these are the questions that you're going to answer pertaining to our friend Ryan here. So the first question you're going to answer is, how would you describe what is going on to a healthcare provider if you were Ryan? So as I mentioned before, right here, sorry. You are going to want to be clear and concise. Where'd that go? You're going to want to be clear and concise. What questions would you ask? So we just talked about this a moment ago, and I gave you guys a bunch of examples. You don't have to use all of my examples. You can certainly come up with your own, or you can certainly Google some if you're stumped on that one. And the very last thing you're going to do for Ryan is imagine that the healthcare provider suggests getting some blood work done to rule out some potential problems. What kind of questions would you ask if that were the case? And then you're going to do the same thing for our friend Sebastian here. Then you're going to do the same thing for Michaela. And then you're going to do the same thing for Michael. The questions are a little bit different for each one. Make sure that you read each one, understand what it's asking. Ask your group mates. You can do this in groups of 3 or 4 if you want to. You don't have to, but you're allowed to. So if you don't know what that question is, ask your group mates first, then ask some of your other classmates. If you're still not sure what that question means, then email me. I'll email you back as quick as I can. So that, I believe that is everything. That is where we are going to stop things. I hope you all have a great Thanksgiving, and yeah, I hopefully will see you all on Wednesday, next Wednesday.